The sheer popularity that Invincible managed to achieve, I feel like it should be safe to make a video on this matchup that I really wanted to talk about for a long time, but I really didn't have any good time to do it, so right now it's the perfect time, and that is Ragnars from Invincible versus the Death Angels from A Quiet Place. And I'm not gonna lie, this isn't close. Here comes a category that I don't think people will disagree, and that's speed. If we go by raw movement speed, yeah, Death Angels are much crazier. But if we go by actual reaction speed and combat speed, Ragnars are far beyond that. I have calculated myself one of the feats that is shown in the animation itself. Granted, the feat might not be literal, but given that even at the time, Nolan and other Viltrumites were actually getting hard pressed by Ragnars and that they needed to block the planet, shows that even if they were at their peak, given that they just survived the plot thing that I'm not going to spoil, I feel like the gap in speed shouldn't be that big, so they should at least scale somewhat to either relativistic to maybe faster than light at a bare minimum. And for the Death Angels, they don't have anything impressive, they don't really dodge, they just kinda just ram into things and destroy stuff, which it's impressive to an extent, but it's not a thing compared to like being relativistic. So yeah, Ragnars take combat speed and reaction, meanwhile Death Angels just take normal speed. Another category that's really obvious is abilities and hexes. Ragnars are just really strong, and you can argue that they have really good endurance and resistance to high temperatures, given that they were frozen for a long period of time, and even after all the time they still had the energy to throw hands with both Alan and Nolan, which you can argue weren't holding back, or you can argue that they were, but even then neither party was actually at their pinnacle, so there's that argument to be made. As for Death Angels, do I really need to say anything? These guys have some keen sense of hearing and have a very really durable shell, which I'm gonna touch upon, which people probably won't like. But yeah, if we go by abilities, then it's not exactly one-sided, more so that the other side doesn't really have anything that impacts combat directly, the other does. One category that you might argue Death Angels have the edge is actually experience, and this is because we don't know how old these things can get, nor how old they actually are. I'd argue that both of these guys should be really old, at least for like animal standards, but we don't have definitive answer on which species can live the longest. But I would say that given how they fight, I don't see experience really making a difference. One category that I really want to bring up is overall skill in combat, and I gotta say, Ragnar's kind of steal this one. They are much more skilled in comparison to Death Angels, and to be honest, Death Angels are kind of trash, given that all they know is to throw themselves at something and then slash away, even if it's accidentally another Death Angel, which somehow they don't tear each other apart whenever they bump into each other. But with all that said, I'd say that the Death Angels don't have the finesse for combat, given that they mostly rely on brute strength. They can do other moves, but they are not exactly that impressive. So in terms of skill and battle IQ, I'll definitely give this to the Ragnars. Now, as for IQ, well, this one is kinda sorta close, but neither of these guys really do anything that impressive. The Ragnars are not intelligent, but neither are Death Angels. So neither one's gonna be pulling some like ambush or some 300 IQ trap. No, they're just gonna be like running into each other and then tearing each other apart. There's no greater thinking, no strategizing, no anything. That's about it. That's about as far as their level of thinking goes. Which, to be fair, doesn't really mean that they suck. Before we proceed to durability and attack potency, I've got to admit, The Death Angels have one big problem, that being their X Factor and their lack of alternative sensory organs. Given that they mostly rely on audition means that they can be ambushed by other Ragnars, depending on how you structure the scenario, and that would mean that even though they cannot be like planning an ambush, they can be ambushed in return. Ragnars, on the other hand, they really can't, given that they should be able to sense another Death Angel coming, given that those things are not exactly quiet. But I do feel like the X Factor is gonna be more on the favor of the Ragnars, given that they can actually use other senses. We don't know how potent they are, but they should at the very least be somewhat comparable to Death Angels themselves. So yeah, their X Factor definitely backfires against them. Now, I'm not gonna say that this completely fucks up Death Angels, like, at all. I feel like that's a bit too disingenuous, because like, if a Ragnar is making too much noise, the Death Angels are definitely gonna hear it first, and then it's gonna get jumped by like a bunch of them. So yeah, I do feel like the X Factor is not totally a disadvantage, but it should be more of a disadvantage than it is an advantage. Last but not least is your ability, and by consequence, attack potency. I'm gonna be lumping both of them together, given that they have shown to be able to scale to their durability, both of these characters. I know Death Angels have a weakness, but realistically Ragnars can't reproduce high frequency sounds, but they won't need it, trust me. So let's begin with their lower ends, and it's really not looking good. Nolan at season 1 was able to diverge the meteor the size of Texas, which is consistently calculated to be between the moon to even multi-continental levels of attack potency. So it's really debatable whether or not Ragnar should scale to Nolan fully, which, I'm gonna be honest, I feel like they shouldn't, but they should scale to a degree that if Nolan were to fight a Ragnar, he probably will win, but it's not gonna be easy at all. Think like his first fight against Conquest, but Conquest isn't holding back at all, but at the same time Conquest is not as durable or as strong. So I would say that Omni-Man can beat a Ragnar, although it's gonna be extremely difficult, especially if it's fighting on the Ragnar's planet, given that he's not accustomed to such a gravity. Meanwhile, Ragnars are more familiar with that type of force. So at their lower ends, I believe that Ragnars take this. As for the best thing that the Death Angels have, they kinda scale to nukes, but also not. Yes, the government tried to nuke them and it didn't work, but the problem is surface area. He didn't take the full yield of the nuclear bomb. So there really isn't, like, he's not taking mountain or island level shit. He's just taking a small portion of the explosion, and that would only scale to like city block level. So yeah, lower ends, they kinda get outscaled hard, even if you don't want to think Ragnar should scale to Nolan. So like, nah, even when you downplay a bit the Ragnars, they still out-edge the Death Angels in that regard. Now, what about higher ends? I mean, the Death Angels should have at least something to use against the Ragnars, right? No, and if you use higher ends, it's even worse for the Death Angels, for this particular reason. At one point during season 4, Nolan explains that he was able to push a planet closer to its sun, which the most consistent calculations place the speed at the planetary ranges. Granted, the feat itself is rather dubious. We don't have a specific time frame or if it was even a solo feat. Although I feel like it's not completely winged to say that Omni-Man did that by himself. Although I'd say that it took a lot more time. That said, even the lower ends of this feat should at least be planet level. So we have Ragnars, who even if they don't scale to the full yield, should at the bare minimum be small planet level, or even planetary, like barely planetary, against guys who at best survive the explosion of their planet. which again, they don't scale fully because of their surface area. So they didn't take the full yield of their explosion, and that they hit Earth by meteors, by basically hitting like they were meteors. So in terms of actual power and durability, Ragnar still edge, even though their higher ends are a bit more dubious than the actual Death Angels. And yeah, that's it. So how I see this fight going? If we go by lower ends, let's just say that the Death Angels somehow hit planet Ragnar, or whatever it's called, and they landed on it. How long will they survive? Not very long, and it's probably gonna be extinct in like a few hours. First of all, they are on a planet with 10 times the gravity, which we don't know if they're accustomed to or not. Second of all, we know that Ragnars, despite not exactly showing pack hunting skills, are capable of cooperating to a limited extent, or more precisely, performing mob behavior, which crocodiles and Komodo dragons are able to do. They don't necessarily cooperate, but they more so gang up and dogpile on a specific animal, but they don't exactly harm each other. So yeah, they're getting jumped by animals with way better senses, higher durability and strength compared to them. Now I'm gonna give the Death Angels the credit in the fact that they are consistently faster in terms of move speed, but in terms of reactions, the Ragnar should be definitely faster, like comparatively so. So in the end, I feel like they wouldn't survive for very long, and I feel like the Ragnars would like decimate them with barely any difficulty and then just eat their bones for dinner. And that's about it for today's video. I've made this one quite rushed, I'd say. It wasn't exactly a video that I planned to release, nor I really had any intention to talking. Well, the matchup I wanted to talk, but I wished I could do in a more elaborate way. So that's about it for today's video. Remember, if you disagree, comment down below, give me your thoughts and all of that. Subscribe, like, and that's about it for today's video. That's it. See you later, alligator.